The rain hit the window with a steady rhythm, tapping against the glass like a heartbeat. It was a Saturday evening, the kind of evening where everything should have felt calm, almost serene, yet there was a palpable tension in the air. Ethan sat in his living room, his mind racing as he stared out the window at the wet, empty street. His thoughts felt like a storm swirling inside his head, each one crashing into the other with a brutal force that made it impossible to think clearly. The house around him was quiet, eerily so. His wife, Sarah, had been quieter than usual over the past few weeks, but that was nothing compared to how she had been the past few days. The distance between them had grown in a way that he couldn't explain. It was as if she had slowly turned into someone he didn't know, someone who was drifting further and further away from him. It wasn't the first time Ethan had noticed something off. He had become attuned to the smallest shifts in Sarah's behavior, those small inconsistencies that could only be felt, never spoken. It started innocently enough. She had been spending more and more time out with her friends, something she had never done much before. Her late nights at the office had turned into full weekends away. At first, Ethan told himself that it was just stress from her new promotion, the added responsibilities weighing her down. But then there were the unexplained absences, the way her smile no longer reached her eyes, the way she would flinch if he touched her. And when she spoke to him, her words felt like a performance, a series of rehearsed lines that held no real warmth, no connection. One evening, after dinner, Sarah had told him she was going out to meet an old college friend. The way she said it had an edge to it, something sharp that he hadn't been able to ignore. Ethan had no reason to doubt her, but the suspicion gnawed at him, eating away at his insides. It was the kind of feeling that creeps up on you slowly, so subtle that you're not sure when it started, but by the time you realize what it is, it's already too late. The doubt became an itch that he couldn't scratch, a question that burned in the back of his mind with every passing day. Could she be cheating on him? He never expected to find the answer so soon, or in the way that he did. It wasn't an accidental glance at a text message or a call that was left unanswered. It wasn't even something as simple as an unexpected visitor at their home. No, this discovery came in a much more unusual form, a pair of sunglasses. Ethan had been in the garage, cleaning out the clutter that had built up over the years, when he spotted them. They were sitting on the workbench, just beside the old toolbox, placed carelessly on top of a stack of papers. They didn't belong to him. He knew that immediately. The sleek, dark frames were far too fashionable for his taste, too new to be anything but a recent purchase. But what caught his attention wasn't just the glasses themselves. It was the tag still hanging from the side, the price tag, the brand name, a luxury brand that Sarah had always mentioned in passing, one that he knew she couldn't afford on her own salary. She had made it clear that such things were too extravagant, something she would never waste money on. It had always been one of her little quirks, the way she prided herself on being practical, on making careful, thought-out decisions with their finances. And yet here they were, a pair of sunglasses, the kind of item she would never purchase without good reason. Ethan's heart began to race, his breath catching in his throat as he picked up the sunglasses. He turned them over in his hands, feeling the weight of them like a physical presence in the pit of his stomach. There was no way this was an innocent mistake, no way this could be explained away. He knew that if he confronted her now, he would get some story, some excuse, something that would make him question his own thoughts. He had been down this road before, the road where he second-guessed himself, where his own instincts were cast aside in favor of trying to understand the truth in a way that made sense. But this time, there was no escaping it. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Sarah had been lying to him. And it wasn't just a small lie, something that could be explained away. No, this was the kind of lie that changed everything. His hands trembled as he placed the sunglasses back on the bench, his mind racing with the implications. Was she seeing someone else? Had she been hiding something from him for weeks, months even? And if so, why? He heard the door open, the soft click of Sarah's footsteps as she stepped inside the garage. She froze when she saw him standing there, holding the sunglasses in his hand, staring at them like they were the key to unraveling everything. Her eyes widened, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face before she quickly masked it with a smile. "Oh, you found them," she said, her voice too calm, too rehearsed. "I've been looking for those." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He simply stared at her, the words trapped in his throat, his mind trying to make sense of what he had just discovered. "Where did you get these?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper, as if he was afraid to hear the answer. Sarah's smile faltered for just a moment, before she quickly regained her composure. "I bought them a few days ago," she replied, her eyes avoiding his. "I thought they were on sale, and I really like the style. I was going to surprise you with them later." Ethan didn't believe her. Not for a second. The lie hung in the air between them, thick and suffocating. He could feel his anger rising, but he pushed it down, fighting to keep control. There were too many questions, too many things that didn't add up, and it was all coming to a head now, right in front of him. The sunglasses were just the beginning. The more he thought about it, the more everything started to unravel. The small, subtle signs, the way she had been acting lately, it all pointed to one inevitable conclusion. She had been seeing someone else. The silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable, until Ethan finally spoke again. "I want to know the truth, Sarah. All of it." Sarah's face paled, and her gaze dropped to the floor, as if the weight of his words was too much for her to bear. She took a hesitant step backward, her hands clenching at her sides, as if she were trying to keep herself from falling apart. Ethan couldn't bring himself to look away from her. There was a long pause, a painful silence, before Sarah finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her words shaky, laced with a forced calmness that did nothing to mask the tension hanging between them. Ethan's grip on the sunglasses tightened. His mind was working in overdrive, each thought a sharp, painful realization. He had been trying to convince himself that this was just a misunderstanding, that he was overreacting, but now, with her standing there, avoiding his gaze, all the pieces started to fall into place. Every subtle sign, every odd moment over the past few months, suddenly seemed to make perfect sense. He had been blind, too afraid to face the truth, but now it was all clear. The lies, the secrets, they had been building for a long time. "You've been seeing someone else, haven't you?" Ethan's voice was steady, but inside, his heart was racing, his thoughts a blur. He couldn't bring himself to say the words that had been haunting him for weeks, the words that would make everything real. It felt like he was speaking them into existence, and with each passing second, it became harder to breathe, harder to think. But he couldn't stop himself. He needed answers. He needed the truth. Sarah stiffened at his question, her entire body tensing as if she had been struck. For a moment, she said nothing, just stood there in the dimly lit garage, her eyes avoiding his. Ethan could see her fighting with herself, the internal battle playing out in the way her lips quivered, the way her fingers dug into her palms. Finally, she exhaled, her breath shaky, and when she spoke again, her voice was tinged with guilt, but she didn't meet his eyes. "You don't understand," she said, her voice barely audible. "It's not what you think." Ethan's chest tightened. He could feel the frustration building up, the anger threatening to spill over, but he held it back, his mind focused solely on her words. "Then tell me, Sarah," he said, his voice low, demanding. "Tell me what it is, because I don't know what to believe anymore." Sarah hesitated, and for a moment, it seemed like she might turn and walk away, avoiding the conversation altogether. But instead, she took a deep breath and slowly sat down on the edge of the workbench, her eyes finally meeting his. There was something vulnerable in her gaze, but it was mixed with a certain defensiveness, as if she were trying to protect herself from the consequences of her actions. It's not an affair like you think," she said slowly, her voice trembling slightly. "It's just complicated." Ethan's frustration reached a boiling point. "Complicated?" he repeated, his voice rising. "You're telling me that having an affair is complicated? Sarah, you've been lying to me for months. How is that complicated? How do you expect me to understand any of this? What the hell is going on?" Sarah looked down at her hands, her fingers fidgeting with the edges of her sleeves, her face flushed with shame. Ethan could see the guilt in her eyes now, but it wasn't enough to justify the lies, the betrayal. "I never meant for it to happen like this," she said, her voice cracking. "It just happened. It started with someone I met at work. We became friends, and one thing led to another. I didn't plan it, Ethan. I didn't want it to get out of control." Ethan took a step forward, his heart pounding, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. The words didn't make sense to him. He couldn't comprehend what she was saying. "You didn't want it to get out of control? You've been sleeping with him, haven't you? All this time, you've been sleeping with someone else, and you expect me to believe this bullshit excuse." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, her breath coming in shaky sobs. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never thought it would go this far. But it did, and now I don't know how to fix it." Ethan was shaking with anger now. His entire body was tense, his fist clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "You don't know how to fix it?" he spat, his voice raw with emotion. "You don't know how to fix it, Sarah? Do you even hear yourself? You've been betraying me, lying to me, and now you want to sit there and act like I'm the one who's supposed to fix this." Sarah flinched at his words, and for a moment, Ethan thought she might cry. But instead, she stood up abruptly, her face red with emotion. I didn't want to hurt you, she repeated, this time more forcefully, as if she were trying to convince herself. I never meant for this to happen. But I didn't know what to do anymore. I've been lost. Ethan's mind was spinning. He didn't know what to believe, what to think. Everything about Sarah, everything he thought he knew about her, seemed to be crumbling in front of him. The woman he had loved for so long, the woman he had trusted with his heart, was standing here, admitting to something he never could have imagined. How could he have been so blind? How could he have let it go on for so long without seeing the signs? Lost? Ethan repeated, his voice cold, distant. You've been lost, Sarah? And this is your answer? You go behind my back, betray me, and then tell me you're lost? You think that makes it okay? Sarah took a step toward him, her face desperate, pleading. Ethan, please, just listen. I never wanted to hurt you. I was confused, I don't know. But it wasn't just about him. It wasn't about the affair, it was about me, about my own insecurities, my own struggles. Ethan shook his head, the anger in him threatening to take over. So, what? You thought you could fix yourself by destroying everything we built together? By lying to me? By lying to us? I never meant for it to happen like this, Sarah repeated, her voice growing more frantic, more desperate. I thought I could control it, but I couldn't. I was wrong. And now I don't know how to make it right. Ethan didn't know how to respond to that. There were so many questions, so many things he wanted to say, but nothing seemed to make sense. How could she be standing here, trying to explain something that could never be explained away? The truth was out now, and no matter how many apologies she offered, no matter how many tears she shed, the damage had been done. The silence in the room stretched on, suffocating, as Ethan stood there, trying to process the avalanche of emotions crashing down on him. Sarah was still standing a few feet away, her shoulders hunched as if the weight of her own guilt was too much to bear. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that everything he had known was now a lie. How could it be so easy for her to betray him? How could she look him in the eyes and say those things, the things that were meant to explain it all away, when in truth, there was nothing to explain? It was as if the woman he had spent years with, the woman he thought he knew inside and out, had disappeared. Ethan's chest felt tight, like a band was being pulled around it, restricting his breath. He could feel his heart pounding, each beat a reminder of how deeply he had been hurt. But the anger was starting to creep in too. The anger he had tried to keep at bay, the anger that surged through his veins, demanding to be unleashed. He needed answers, but he also needed her to understand the gravity of what she had done. He took a step toward her, his voice low but sharp. How long, Sarah? He asked, his words cutting through the silence like a blade. How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me? Sarah took a step back, as if the force of his words had physically hit her. Her lips parted, but no sound came out at first. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear, regret, and something else that he couldn't quite identify. It was as if she was waiting for him to soften, to give her the benefit of the doubt, to show her some kindness. But Ethan was done being kind. I don't know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know how it happened. It wasn't planned. I never meant for it to go this far. She broke off, her words failing her as she stared at the floor, unable to look him in the eye. Ethan clenched his fists at his sides, his nails digging into the palms of his hands. The anger was burning inside him now, sharp and intense. Don't tell me it wasn't planned, Sarah, he said, his voice growing louder with each word. Don't tell me it just happened. You don't get to tell me that. You don't get to pretend like this wasn't something you chose. You made a decision every time you walked away from me, every time you kept things from me. Don't act like I'm the one who's supposed to understand. Sarah looked up at him, her face crumpling in distress. I'm sorry, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't want to be this person. I didn't want to betray you, Ethan. I didn't want this to happen. But Ethan wasn't ready to listen to her apologies. He had been listening to her for months, listening to her excuses, listening to her reasons, and now it was his turn to be heard. He took a step closer to her, his jaw clenched, his breath steady but heavy. You think I want your apologies now? He asked, his voice dangerously calm. What does that even mean at this point? What good is, I'm sorry, when the trust is gone? When you've done something that can never be undone? What good is it when you've already shattered everything? Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and she stepped forward, reaching for him as if she could close the distance between them with a single touch. Please, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please don't hate me. I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted to destroy us. I never wanted to hurt you. I... Ethan pulled away from her, his hands held up in front of him as if he were pushing her away physically, though he didn't even touch her. Hate you, he repeated, his voice rising now, his anger spilling out uncontrollably. You think this is about hate? This isn't about hate, Sarah. This is about betrayal. This is about the fact that you've destroyed everything I believed in. Everything we built together. Do you even understand what you've done? Do you? He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, but the words kept coming, too fast, too sharp. You know what hurts the most? It's not even the affair. It's that you thought you could get away with it. That you thought I wouldn't see it. That you thought I wouldn't notice the little things, the distance, the lies, the way you couldn't even look me in the eye anymore. It's like you didn't even care about what we had. You just kept on doing it, kept on lying, and expecting me to be okay with it. He turned away from her, pacing across the garage, his hands running through his hair in frustration. His mind was spinning, his thoughts tangled in a web of confusion and betrayal. He didn't know what he was supposed to do with all this. There were no answers, no easy way out. Everything felt heavy, like a weight pressing down on him, crushing him from the inside out. Sarah's voice was small now, almost fragile as she spoke again. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't even deserve you. But I swear, Ethan, I never meant to hurt you. I didn't want to destroy what we had. I thought I was making a mistake, but by the time I realized it, I was already too deep. I couldn't stop. Ethan turned back to face her, his eyes burning with intensity. You're right, he said, his voice cold, distant. You didn't deserve my forgiveness. You didn't deserve any of it. You didn't deserve any of the trust one gave you, and you sure as hell didn't deserve the life we built together. The words stung, and as they hung in the air, Ethan realized how much they hurt him, too. He had never imagined speaking to her like this, never imagined that it would come to this. He had never wanted to feel this way, to turn into someone capable of such anger, such hurt. But here they were, on the edge of something neither of them could control, each one standing on opposite sides of a chasm too wide to bridge. He took a deep breath, exhaling slowly, trying to keep his emotions in check. The silence between them was deafening now, the weight of everything that had been said hanging in the air like a thick fog. I don't know what to do anymore, Sarah, Ethan finally whispered, his voice quieter now, the anger spent, replaced with exhaustion. I don't know if I can fix this. I don't know if I can even look at you the same way again. Ethan stood there, motionless, his thoughts swirling in his head like a storm he couldn't control. The silence between him and Sarah stretched on, unbearable, thick with the weight of everything they had just spoken. There was no resolution, no way forward, no path that seemed clear. He had never imagined that it would come to this, that the woman he had loved, the woman who had once been his partner in everything, could betray him in such a profound way. And yet, here they were, standing on the edge of something broken beyond repair, each of them unsure of how to pick up the pieces. Sarah's eyes were red from crying, but there was a certain desperation in them now, as if she was searching for a way to fix things, a way to make everything better. But Ethan couldn't find it in himself to offer her the comfort she was looking for. He couldn't bring himself to soften the blow, to make her feel better when, in his heart, he knew that what had been done was unforgivable. There was no way back. Not anymore. For a moment, he considered leaving, walking out the door and never looking back. But something inside him snapped, a part of him that had been quiet for too long suddenly awakening. He had been trying to hold on to something that wasn't there, something that had already been lost. The trust, the bond they had once shared, it was gone. And now, all that was left was the sting of betrayal and the need for retribution. He didn't know what he expected from Sarah, but in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was how he would deal with this, how he would make her feel even a fraction of the pain he was feeling right now. Ethan turned away from her and walked toward the door, his footsteps heavy, deliberate. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do, but he knew he couldn't just stand there and pretend like nothing had happened. He couldn't go on like this, pretending that everything was fine, that this wasn't the end of something he had poured his heart into. He needed to make her see the consequences of her actions. He needed to make her understand the depth of his pain. Where are you going? Sarah's voice was shaky, almost pleading, but Ethan didn't look back. He didn't want to see her anymore, didn't want to hear her apologies. He couldn't take it. Not now. Not after everything. I don't know yet, he replied coldly, his voice devoid of the warmth it once held. But I'm not staying here. As he walked out of the garage and into the house, he could feel the weight of every step, each one taking him farther away from the life they had built together. But there was no going back. Not now. He had been wronged in a way he couldn't ignore, And while he wasn't sure what he was supposed to do with that anger, he knew one thing for certain: he needed to make her understand. Ethan stepped into their bedroom, his mind racing, his heart pounding. He was furious, but it wasn't the kind of fury that could be easily expressed in words. It was deeper than that. It was a kind of fury that demanded action, a kind that wouldn't let him rest until he had taken control of the situation, until he had made Sarah see the consequences of her betrayal. He looked around the room, the place that had once felt like a sanctuary, and something inside him hardened. He began to pack a bag, his movements quick and purposeful. He wasn't sure where he was going, but he didn't care. He needed to get out of the house, away from Sarah, away from everything that had been poisoned by her lies. The clothes he grabbed felt foreign in his hands, like they belonged to someone else. But he wasn't thinking about that. He was thinking about the betrayal, about the fact that his life had been turned upside down, that the woman he had trusted with everything had broken him. And there was nothing he could do to undo that. Nothing he could do to fix it. His mind kept drifting back to the affair, to the man she had been seeing. The anger that had been simmering beneath the surface bubbled up again, this time more intense, more consuming. He couldn't just let her get away with this. He couldn't just let it slide. She had taken something from him, and now he was going to take something back. Something she couldn't get back. The trust. The security. The life they had built together. Ethan knew it was a twisted form of revenge, but it was all he could think about in the moment. He didn't care about fixing things anymore. He didn't care about talking or reasoning or trying to understand her feelings. All that mattered was making her feel the same way he did. He wanted her to understand the pain he felt, to feel the weight of the betrayal crushing down on her the same way it had crushed him. He needed that closure, needed to make sure she knew what she had done. He grabbed his phone, his fingers trembling as he typed out a message to the man Sarah had been seeing. It wasn't much, just a few short sentences, but they were enough. Enough to send a message. Enough to make him understand that Ethan knew everything, that he knew exactly what had been happening behind his back. The message was simple, direct, and harsh. There was no room for ambiguity, no room for negotiation. Ethan didn't want to make it easy for Sarah to spin any more lies. He didn't want to give her a chance to excuse herself, to hide behind more apologies. This was it. The end. He sent the message and sat down on the bed, his heart pounding, his mind racing. There was no turning back now. He had crossed a line, and he knew that. But in that moment, it felt like the only thing that could give him any sense of control, any sense of power in a situation where he had been powerless. He couldn't go back to the way things were. He couldn't pretend that everything was fine. But maybe, just maybe, this would make her see. Maybe this would make her feel the weight of what she had done. The minutes ticked by slowly, painfully. Ethan sat there, waiting, his thoughts running wild. He knew Sarah would be furious when she found out. He knew she would feel the sting of his revenge, the realization that he had done something she couldn't undo. And maybe that would give him some satisfaction, some sense of justice. But it didn't feel like enough. It didn't feel like it would heal the wound inside him. Nothing would. He heard the sound of footsteps approaching the bedroom door, and he knew Sarah was coming. He didn't move. He didn't say anything. He just waited, knowing that everything was about to change, knowing that this was the moment where everything they had built together would crumble once and for all. The sound of Sarah's footsteps echoed in the hallway, growing louder as she approached the bedroom. Ethan remained seated on the bed, his eyes fixed on the door, his hands trembling slightly. The anger that had fueled him just moments ago was beginning to fade, replaced by a hollow feeling, a sense of exhaustion that seemed to sink deep into his bones. He couldn't stop what had already happened. He had taken his revenge, but in the aftermath, he found that it hadn't brought him any peace. He didn't feel satisfied. Instead, he felt a kind of emptiness, as if he had traded one kind of pain for another. There was no satisfaction in this, no sense of justice. He had made her feel the hurt he had felt, but it didn't change anything. It didn't make anything right. When Sarah walked into the room, she didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, taking in the sight of him sitting on the bed, his bag packed, his phone resting on the nightstand. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying, but there was something else there too. A coldness. A distance. She didn't look like the woman he had known for so many years. She looked like a stranger, someone he couldn't recognize anymore. "You did it," she said finally, her voice low, strained. "You really went through with it." Ethan didn't look at her. He couldn't. The sight of her standing there, her face a mask of sorrow and regret, only made the pain worse. He had expected her to fight back, to try to justify herself, to plead for forgiveness one more time. But there was none of that now. She didn't argue. She didn't try to explain herself. She just stood there, waiting, as if the damage had already been done, as if nothing she could say would change what had happened. I had to, Ethan replied, his voice flat, devoid of any emotion. I had to make you understand. I couldn't just sit here and pretend like everything was okay. You don't get to do what you did and then expect me to act like it never happened. Sarah's eyes flickered with something close to guilt, but she quickly masked it, her expression hardening. I know I've hurt you, Ethan. I know that nothing I say can undo that. But I never wanted this. I never wanted to destroy everything we had. Ethan finally turned his head to look at her, his eyes meeting hers. There was a moment of silence between them, a heavy pause that seemed to stretch on forever. It was as if they were both waiting for the other to say something, to offer a solution, a way forward. But there was no solution, no easy way out. The damage had already been done, and now, all that was left was the aftermath. The words that had been spoken, the lies that had been told, couldn't be erased. I don't know if I can forgive you, Sarah, Ethan said, his voice quieter now, but still carrying the weight of everything that had happened. I don't know if I can even look at you the same way again. Sarah's face faltered, her eyes filling with tears once again. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said softly. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that. But I still love you, Ethan. I always have. Ethan shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. Love? He repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. You still love me? After everything? After what you did? It doesn't work like that, Sarah. You can't just throw away everything we've built, everything we've shared, and then expect me to believe that you still love me. I never wanted to throw it away, Sarah said, her voice breaking. I never meant to hurt you. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was confused, and I made a terrible mistake. But I still love you. I always will. Ethan stood up from the bed, feeling the weight of her words pressing down on him. The room seemed smaller now, the walls closing in around him as he processed what she was saying. Her love, her apologies, they all felt like empty words now. She had betrayed him in the worst possible way, and no amount of love or regret could change that. It didn't matter how much she cried, how much she pleaded. What mattered was that she had crossed a line that he wasn't sure could ever be uncrossed. I don't know what to say to you, Sarah, Ethan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what you want me to say. I don't know if there's anything left to say. I don't want you to say anything, she replied, her voice soft but firm. I don't want you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I need you to understand that I never meant for this to happen. I don't want to lose you, Ethan. I don't want this to be the end of us. Ethan's heart ached, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to make him forget what she had done, to make him overlook the pain she had caused. There was a part of him that still wanted to believe her, still wanted to hold on to the hope that they could fix this, that they could somehow find a way back to the love they once shared. But there was another part of him, the part that had been shattered, the part that had seen the truth for what it was, that knew this was the end. He walked toward the door, his bag in hand, and stopped just short of stepping into the hallway. He turned back to Sarah one last time, his gaze softening only slightly as he looked at her. I don't think we can come back from this, Sarah, he said, his voice low and steady. I don't think there's anything left to fix. I need to go. Sarah didn't move, didn't try to stop him. She just stood there, her face a mask of sorrow and resignation, as if she had already accepted the truth. The truth that Ethan was leaving, that their marriage was over, that nothing would ever be the same again. Ethan opened the door and stepped into the hallway, the sound of it clicking shut behind him echoing in his ears. He didn't look back. He couldn't. It was over. The life they had built, the love they had shared, was gone, and all that was left now was the silence of the empty house, and the slow, painful realization that nothing would ever be the same again. Ethan's footsteps echoed through the empty hallway, the sound of his shoes on the hardwood floor filling the space around him. It was a strange sensation, leaving the house he had shared with Sarah for so long. He had walked through those rooms thousands of times, each one filled with memories of their life together, memories that now felt like they belonged to someone else. The weight of the decision he had made, the decision to leave, hung heavy in his chest, a constant reminder of the betrayal that had led him here. He had thought he would feel relief, or perhaps a sense of finality, but instead, all he felt was emptiness. As he reached the front door, he stopped for a moment, his hand resting on the doorknob. He had already packed his things, ready to leave, but part of him was still unsure, still questioning whether this was the right thing to do. Could he ever forgive Sarah? Could he ever rebuild the trust they had lost? The thought of staying, of trying to make things work, lingered in the back of his mind, but he knew deep down that it wasn't possible. The foundation of their relationship had been shattered, and no amount of time or effort could fix that. He opened the door and stepped outside, the cool evening air hitting his face like a wave. The sky was dark, the only light coming from the street lamps that lined the quiet street. It was a sharp contrast to the chaos he had just left behind, the noise of the arguments, the accusations, and the pain that had filled the house. Now, there was nothing but silence. He closed the door behind him, the finality of the sound reverberating in his chest, and began walking down the steps. The street was empty, just like everything else in his life felt at that moment. He had no clear direction, no plan, no idea where he was going. All he knew was that he couldn't stay there. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a sudden jolt that startled him. He pulled it out, staring at the screen for a moment before unlocking it. It was a message from Sarah, her name flashing in the notification bar. His finger hovered over the screen, and for a brief second, he thought about ignoring it, about leaving her behind completely. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the years they had spent together, the memories they had shared. Or maybe it was the part of him that still wanted to believe that things could be different, that he could find some way to forgive her. He opened the message. It was short, simple, and filled with desperation. Please don't leave like this. We can fix it. We can still fix us. I love you. Ethan's heart ached as he read the words, but there was no longer any confusion in his mind. The truth had been laid bare, and nothing could change what had happened. He couldn't undo the betrayal, and no amount of pleading or begging would make him forget. He had to move on. He had to let go. He locked the phone and shoved it back into his pocket, his hand shaking slightly as he did. The cold air seemed to wrap around him, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he felt the weight of the world lift off his shoulders. He didn't know what the future held, didn't know where he would go from here, but he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't stay in the past any longer. He couldn't stay tied to someone who had broken him, no matter how much he still cared about her. As he walked down the street, the silence of the night enveloped him. It was strange how quiet everything seemed now. It was as if the world had stopped for a moment, waiting for him to make his next move. He didn't know where he was going, but for the first time in a long time, it didn't matter. He had always been someone who wanted answers, who needed to understand everything, to make sense of it all. But now, as he walked alone in the dark, he realized that some things didn't have answers. Some things weren't meant to be fixed. The betrayal had been too deep, too damaging, and there was no way to undo what had been done. The journey ahead was unclear, but it was his to take. He had spent so much time in the past, trying to fix something that was broken, trying to make things work with Sarah, that he had forgotten what it felt like to take control of his own life. Now, for the first time in a long time, he was free. Free from the lies. Free from the pain. As the night stretched on, Ethan walked further into the darkness, his thoughts a mixture of sadness, anger, and, for the first time, a sense of possibility. He didn't know what the future would bring, but he knew he had to keep moving forward. There was no going back. There was no undoing what had happened. But maybe, just maybe, there was something better waiting for him on the other side of all this. Something that didn't come with betrayal or broken trust. He wasn't sure what that something would look like, but he was ready to find it. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was his to travel. And that was enough.